finally, a source of raw, real, and honest information on healthcare issues that matter most. Welcome to BS Free MD. From the latest medical information to how to stay sane as a doctor or a patient, no subject is taboo, no BS is allowed. Now, let's welcome your hosts, Doctors May and Tim Hindmarsh.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of BS Free MD. We're hoping you're having a great summer. And, we've got a good show for you today. Financial planning is an essential aspect of life that is often neglected until it's too late. And many people, regardless of their profession or income level, fail to plan for their financial future, leaving them vulnerable to financial instability and uncertainty. However, starting financial planning early can make a significant difference in one's financial well-being. And it's one of the 4 F's in our pillars of importance.
It sure is. In this episode with Daniel Wrenne of Wrenne Financial Planning, we talk about the importance of starting financial planning early. What does this actually mean? And we go down a lot of rabbit holes that are really fun. Early retirement, is it good? Is it bad? Just all sorts of really interesting concepts, because it really comes down to what's money for and why do you need it and why do you want it? So it starts with why should you plan in the first place? And so it ends in some really good places. So just tune in, listen, and find out. All right. Today we are talking to Daniel Wrenne of Wrenne Financial Planning, and a fellow podcaster as well. He'll tell you a little bit about that. We're going to talk about some money mistakes, some ways to plan for the future, which, when I started my career 30 years ago, I didn't really think much about. We just sort of did what we were told. And now getting close to retirement, it's like, holy moly, it is a different world out there.
Sneaks up on you.
Yes, it does. So welcome, Daniel, and May, still in Hawaii for another almost a week. Not quite.
I know. How many more shows can we do while I'm here? Or how long can I stay? I guess I'll ask Daniel. How long? Can you tell me how far I can make my money? Yay! I'm not
Can't put a
back,
price
Tim.
on a good time. I'm going to say all the reverse things that financial planners normally say today.
Right.
Exactly. Sun and happiness does a lot for motivation. So that's for sure.
Yes,
and
that is right.
Yes. So here I am.
Well, thanks
still.
for having me.
You bet.
Yeah, we are honored to have you on and super excited for you to share with our listeners because, gosh, I heard you talk, I think it was, I don't know how many years ago, but on another podcast, which is, now no longer in operation, Physician Wealth with Physician Wealth Services, which it was financial residency program, which I learned so much of. And it was in the phase of our life when, as Tim said, we kind of just kept the bicycle wheels going and really had no idea. We were putting money away, kind of just doing the matching at work and not really thinking about it because we both grew up from different financial planning generations. And then all of a sudden we got to a certain age. It was like our late 40s, 50s. And we looked at each other and we're like, oh, we're getting up there. We don't even have a clue if we have enough money. How do we even know? And we did reach out to another company for some advice, but I was like, okay, I got to educate myself. And that's when I started listening to a ton of podcasts, but really honed in on financial residency because it was targeted for physicians. And I just ate that up. I was out in the garden. I had it playing continuously and was trying to get all this knowledge. But I think a lot of people like us, doesn't matter if you're a professional, I won't say, own your own business, but just people start off and then they just think, okay, I'm just going to work. I know most people don't save money, but they don't have a plan. Yeah. And then one day they wake up like us at 50 going, oh crap, did I just screw away all my money? And so, I guess our hope is that by talking about it, people hearing it, even on a medical podcast, they wake up. And for us, we always talk about the 4 pillars, the 4 F's. So there's faith, family, finances, and fun. And finances are a big deal in your mental health, your marriage, everything. So for us, finance is a big thing that we put and talk about. And so we're here to just, I think, help educate people on some basic stuff. So let's talk about the plan. I guess, when do you start thinking about a plan? When should you? I mean, and how do you plan? And how do you make a decision what to do with your money and save?
Yeah. I'm a big fan of of course I'm a financial planner, I would say this, but the sooner the better, and really like childhood. So I love starting to teach my kids. Like my middle child is 7, my oldest is 10. So both of them I've, given them money books and have started to kind of introduce money conversations, and they have money that they're working with and making spending decisions, stuff like that. I feel like, if you look at the research, a lot of our money habits are established by the age of 7, which is crazy. So childhood, I think, is the best time to start planning. And that sounds maybe nutty to people listening, but like a plan doesn't have to be like super complicated and like retirement projections, all this stuff. It could just be like, okay, you earn some money. What are you going to do with it? So a plan, in my view, a plan is really just being a little bit more intentional about like what your plan is for your finances. And for my, 7-year-old, it's as simple as being like, okay, we're going to save this amount, we're going to give some away, and we're going to spend the rest on Pokemon cards or something. And that's his plan. And he's like pumped up about it. And then he gets to make the buying decisions on like, do I buy a Pokemon on Amazon with my money? And then I realize it's fake. And then I learned something about that, because like it's important to kind of do your due diligence on purchases. And then he's buying Nintendo stock. And, so I think it starts at 7.
Yeah.
Or the sooner the better. But, it's never too late to start either.
So I'm thinking about when I was a kid. Tim's probably thinking about when he was a kid, and what our parents taught was we had a totally different background growing up. So for myself, my family, my dad had a sort of lower middle income, class income. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, very good with money, very frugal. I mean, they retired pretty wealthy for what they earned. But the lesson I got was hard work and save your money. And it was back in the day when you go to the bank, and you had the passbooks where the lady stamped it with the date and would write in your deposit and all that. And it was exciting because you could watch your literally money grow, and you had this passbook. But I was taught save, and you earn, and you save your money. And it was just save, 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 save. And when I was in high school, I worked a lot. My mom was like, okay, save, because you have this goal of going to university. It's expensive. We can't afford to pay for it all. You need to save. And I worked jobs. I worked 40 hours a week lifeguarding. I had babysitting. I saved and saved and saved. And so you can imagine now I go to university, and I got into med school young, and I had summer jobs, but it was paying for that and then accruing debt. And by the time we got done and I got a real job and was a doctor, I was like, I don't want to swear, but I'm like, F this saving. Like, it's been such long delayed gratification from when I was a kid, because I never get to spend this stuff that it was crazy. And so that lesson maybe that I learned was it was all save and not spend some fun money. That's what happened to me. So there's got to be balance in there, right?
Oh yeah. And that's I mean, some people get along with just saving forever, but then it's like, what's the point of the savings? So the question is like, what's the point of the savings? I think that's important to kind of peel back the layers on. And then also like financial literacy is important, kind of to complement a plan, because a lot of people have plans, but they're not really, they haven't done the financial literacy part very well. So they're not aware of the whole concept of like compound interest and delayed gratification. So, as I learned, like, for example, for me, I think back in my childhood, as I started to learn about like compound interest and how it works within, your money and saving for long term, it really like amped up the motivation to want to save for the long term stuff and like get through the delayed gratification hurdle, and forfeit some of the short term things. But either way, you still have to have the balance. But I think you kind of want to pair it with that financial literacy piece, even as young as like childhood. And so I think that's what our parents are not great about doing. Like my friends and our age, I have young kids, our parents are not doing a great job yet again about like talking about some of these additional concepts.
Well, I think what you said to the point about understanding compound interest, putting money away at a young age is huge. And I think it's probably, you're right, the majority are lean that way, where it's like, I will eventually save. But so then you're in your 20s and you're in that gap. Say you started coming out of college, get a job, and then it's like, now I'm going to spend my money. I got things to do, things to buy, car, rent, food, furniture, trips. But you don't realize how huge compound interest is, and that putting money away then is going to reap huge benefits instead of starting later. So there's that balance.
Well, I can't speak enough about the epidemic, at least in our generation. So I'm the very beginning of Gen Z or the very end of the baby boomers, depending on who you believe. I was born in 65. So my parents were born in the 20s, the 1920s. And they came through the Depression, literally eating dried fish and dried fruit in the prairies of Canada, not knowing where your next meal is coming from. And no one died poor, not their parents, not them, nobody. So they did something right, but they never communicated any of these principles, like the principles of start saving early, compound interest, pay yourself first, be adequately insured. I mean, none of this stuff is very complicated. It's actually really, really simple. And it's actually, I think, very simple to communicate. But there's like an epidemic of financial ignorance. It just blows my mind. Like the people my age. So I have friends, like business owners. No, the stock market is BS. You're throwing your money away. Like literally, I've had these conversations, and I'm just like, okay, look at the stock market historically for the last 100 years. You will retire rich if you just put it in an S&P fund, put 10% of your income away and walk away from it. And in 30 years, you'll be able to maintain your lifestyle that you're living right now. Like it's not hard.
Yeah, that in itself is a big financial literacy thing that a lot of people struggle with. There's also all these shiny objects in the world, financial things that pull our attention away. I found myself doing this actually like yesterday. I used to collect coins. I still have a coin collection. One of my sons was asking about it. That's always the start for me to kind of get back into old hobby. And so I was looking at my coins. I'm like, wow, they've appreciated quite a bit. And I'm like, I ought to buy some more coins. And then I'm like, my mind starts going like, I ought to invest in coins. And then I start looking online and there's all these, things about investing in coins, how awesome it is. And so I'm like, chill out, dude. Like, let's get logical. So I looked at the return numbers on coins over historical long term. And it was like, inflation roughly, 4 to 6% annual return, which is like pretty good for, ish for, but then you look at I always compare it to the S&P 500 compounded return over the, same period. And it just crushes it. It just like dominates. If you just take the time to look at like, what has the collective stock market done over a long period of time? And that's like a pretty plain vanilla, simple, no really thinking involved. You just own all the stocks investment. You buy the S&P 500. Vanguard has the S&P 500 index. It's super plain and simple. And that has crushed, like just absolutely demolished my little shiny object I was thinking about yesterday. I'm like, once again, I kind of like fell for it but brought myself back to, reality that plain, simple investments are sometimes the best.
But to your point, the coin collection is something you like, you're interested in. So therefore you're more motivated maybe to do that because it's fun for you.
It's literally shiny.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if they're gold, right? Gold coins.
Like,
it's the ADHD nightmare. Look, a quarter. Yeah. No, it's.
But I'm thinking, if it's something that you really enjoy and you like and you're interested in, then you're more likely to do it, right? I'm thinking, so isn't that a positive in some? I mean, not to say don't invest in the stock market, but you find something that appeals to you. So real estate, here you go. Let's talk. I mean, there's another option.
Right.
I know a lot of physicians. The big thing now is, it's like become a doctor and then become a real estate like licensed broker to buy property or apartments or condos, invest in real estate. It's like, seems like that's the thing now for every doctor. I'm like, well, I'm sorry, but that's like a lot of education. That's a lot of work. But if you're into that, no matter who you are, if you're into real estate, it's interesting, then it's a good way to diversify your portfolio and make money as well. So can we talk about like if you are planning and how to invest your money for the future? I think we're kind of going down that route of, what was I thinking? Obviously things that you're interested in matter, but it has to be something that you find worthy, or am I thinking outside the box here?
No, I think that's a good point. But my exercise, the part I didn't mention too, I was thinking about with the coin collection is I'm like, why are you doing this, Daniel? Like, I have a lot of conversations with myself in my head. And I'm like, why are you doing this? Why are you actually looking at these coins? And it's like, well, because I was looking at some kind of ridiculous, like expensive silver dollars or something. And I'm like, because originally it was prompted from my son looking at the coins. And I'm like, really, the reason I was doing it, if I was like honest with myself, was like straight up money. I ultimately realized it was all about the return on investment. And so when I realized that, I'm like, we need to get logical and go compare it to a logical returning vehicle like the S&P 500, because it's not about values so much as it's just about investment. And then that kind of helped me with the whole logical thing. So going back to real estate, a lot of people, most people I encounter that want to get into real estate are doing it purely for the money, if they're honest with themselves. And that's a bad reason, I think, personally, to get into real estate, because it's got all this extra baggage on top of just investing.
Right.
It's like you got to plunge toilets, or what.
Yeah, like let's talk about that like briefly, because I think a lot of people hear that, see that, and they think, oh, that's the way. I mean, I know somebody on my left or my right that's made all this money in real estate. I guess I got to do it too. And you're right. You might have to be, if you're a landlord and you're in there plunging toilets. I mean, Tim's parents owned a townhouse or something, and his mom was always griping about fixing this thing and people calling him. And so it depends. Then there's the unknowns of those, like REITs, real estate investment, like apartments, to me, which is a frightening thing. So real estate's not all that it's cut out to be, right? Because it's a lot of work.
It can be good, but like, think about how they sell it. Like all the gurus sell it like, earn money when you sleep, like passive income.
Yes.
And the word, I'm not a fan of the word passive income. I mean, it can be, kind of passive, but there's not a lot of talk on the front end when like the people sell the idea about all the baggage. I just call it the baggage, but the baggage is where so we work. The cool thing about my job is I get to work with, real people and families and see them go through. Like, I'm not just selling the real estate course. I'm the guy that has to work with them after they bought the real estate idea. And so we get to see them, our typical client buys one property and then like gets frustrated and then gets out of real estate. So, and now we have a few people that like get a million, get a ton of real estate, but like, it's probably 1 out of 10 at best that actually thrives in real estate. And I think it's a lot of times because they're doing it for the wrong reasons, or they've been sold this whole concept that it's just straight up passive income. And it's not. I mean, it's completely not. No matter how you spend it, it is not passive income. It requires some extra work and risk.
We just did property development, which our former advisor said property development really sucks. I would highly advise you not to do it. We needed to do it. It was a no-brainer, and it still is after having gone through it. But literally, if anyone came to me and it wasn't the same situation where, this was our legacy house. We'd lived in for 30 years. We could definitely get a lot more money if we subdivided our property. I mean, it made sense. It was super expensive. It's super time consuming. If you don't have the correct experts on hand that can get everything, buttoned up with your local county or city, you're entirely screwed. It's very, very complex. And there's tons of uncertainty. And basically, if anyone had, if we settle down, move like we're planning on doing, and someone says, "Hey, I got this idea. We're doing property development," I will kick them in the throat.
Right. Yeah. And throw that on top of that, like leverage. If you leverage it all too, like that just amps everything up. If you get debt on top of it, it's like, that's even more potentially stressful or risky.
Oh, I know. Every time we had to dig another hole for another well, I was just like pooping a pickle because I'm like, I just see money going down a hole. Yeah.
Yeah, but at least we weren't leveraged, May. I mean, can you imagine?
No,
if
I know.
8% on that?
I know.
Money?
And then the interest rates start going up. You're like, ugh. So, I mean, it's not, I'm not trying to say it's like terrible always. It can be like a lot of people have built empires from real estate and all the things within real estate. It's just like way overhyped, and you have to be careful with it and understand. I think it's about like, you got to peel back layers on what are your goals and what's most important, really probably what's most important, because that's what I was saying with the coin thing. I've gotten better as I've gotten older about like asking myself, well, why are you actually doing this? Like the why questions, like why are you doing XYZ financial thing? And then peeling back the layers on it.
That kind of sounds to me like, I just think of, I don't know, this might be a wrong analogy, but with real estate, I almost think you almost need to, you're right, be expected to be all in, and it's going to be a lot of work, but that's where your heart is, or almost have it as a second career, as a realtor, real estate broker. Just like my dad, he's a pilot. He's an old pilot, an old bush pilot. And the reason he lived through so many crazy stories and disasters was because he did it as a career. He did it all in. And he was like, you can't be old and bold. You have to be old and safe. And so people that dabble in flying and kind of just, it's going to be a hobby. It scares me. I don't trust them because things can go wrong. And so I think of real estate almost like that. It's like, expect it to be work, expect it not to be passive. If it becomes that, eventually, great, but you probably put in all the work and got the education and had to do a lot. So I'm thinking of Tim's car collection. So that would be another investment piece that he always says, I'm buying another car. It's a good, it's not an investment. It's an investment.
It's not an investment. No, let's time out right there. It's like what people say. You say, the biggest investment you're ever going to have the biggest investment you're ever going to have in your life is your house. No, you're not, because your house isn't an investment. It's a lifestyle choice.
Yes.
Because it's only an investment if it's fungible and you're willing to sell it. Mm-hmm. So are there car collectors that their car collections are investments? Sure, because they'll buy 15 cars and then they'll sell 15 cars and then they'll buy another 15 cars. So as long as you're timing the market correctly, then it's an investment. But what I have I have 3 cars now. 2 of them I are essentially done. One is a project. It's a lifestyle choice that doesn't lose money. Mm-hmm. I mean, it costs you money to do it, but if worse came to worse and you had to, crush the asset, you didn't lose money on the asset. At least it's a hobby that ultimately is, you can recoup your costs, which is huge, right? It's not like buying a new car where that's a total lifestyle choice. That money's gone. So I love the idea of, a hobby that essentially increases your net worth, even though it doesn't increase your cash flow, because I'm not going to sell these things. My plan is to never sell them. So
back to the why, like you said, same with your coin collection. So it would be if you have, I don't know, I know people collect art and people do jewelry or whatever. You have to, automobiles make sense. So you have to look at it as what's the why behind it? Is it more because I'm interested in this thing as a collection and a hobby, or is it trying to be an investment?
Right. And if and if you're honest with yourself, I mean, you always have to try to be honest. And if you're honest, like Tim's saying, it's like, if it's more of a lifestyle thing, then in that case, you kind of just don't count it as an investment. It just ends up being that it's a pretty decent asset.
Right.
And you're not going to put it in a retirement projection, necessarily is like a growth vehicle. But it's definitely going to have a value to it. And it's a lot like the coin collection. I mean, that's a very similar thing. If you enjoy, collecting, and especially when you get kids, like if my son gets into it, I'm going to have a hard time staying out of it. And that's enjoyable. That's like added value. And it's a good bang for your buck if you're enjoying it. That's the key with money.
So let's go. I guess we should. I was thinking we should probably go back to, we were talking about planning, starting when you're a kid and teaching them values and so forth. And then so let's go on from there. Is there a point where obviously your values are going to change, values as much as stages of life change and the different phases. So when you're a kid, obviously you're teaching your kids, hopefully balance money, saving, spending long term. What about then into your 20s and, learning as far as investing, saving, and that we talked about compound interest and learning the value of that young to put money away.
Yeah.
Do you have any recommendations for people then sort of in different decades of life and how to plan out what you should sort of be doing at different decades and where to go?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's very personalized. That's why, so like, as a financial planner, like I'll always say it depends for every answer.
Okay.
It depends on.
So it's not like do this in your teens, do this.
But
in your 20s,
I can give general
40s.
answers. Like I think generally speaking, in your 20s, it's a lot about like career discovery or experimenting. I don't necessarily think saving is that big of a deal. Like I'm not going to hammer my kids about saving hardcore in their 20s. I think, establishing a baseline savings, like say it's like 10% of your income or something, like that's a good habit. But like to me in the 20s, it's more about like finding where you're going to fit in the world career wise, especially. And like finding a good spouse, like you should spend a lot of your resources doing that. And I think that's super important. And so I wouldn't beat yourself up about like not becoming wealthy in your 20s or it's also a good time to learn too, because you have everybody says they're busy, but like usually you have lots of time in your 20s. So that's a great time to like start to kind of beef up on, financial literacy if you haven't already gotten that. But yeah, it really depends on circumstances. Some people like you're talking about being a physician, like the physician career track is very different because it's kind of like delayed in a lot of ways,
Right. Whereas, we have friends that graduated high school, maybe some of them just started working, could have been right at a higher job with no post-secondary education, or maybe they only got a 2-year degree program in a trade, or even if it's a 4-year, I mean, by the time they're 24, they're in the workforce, and that's different, right? Than someone that's doing a professional degree that's still barely 30 when they're done.
But think of this though. Like, okay, so if you go to a trade school now, right, and let's say you get into the like a union electrician or whatever, you'll be a journeyman for sure by 24 if you start right out of high school, and you're making $100,000 almost for sure right out of the bat at 24 years old, and then you put 10% of your income away a year, and you just compound interest that. Yeah. And then you compare that if you're going to be an orthopedic surgeon and you're going to make what do they make on average? Like $500,000 to $600,000 a year, but you're not going to start till you're 32 or 33 years old, and you're going to be negative. You're going to have a negative net worth of $350,000 when you start.
At least.
It's a long time before the orthopedic surgeon catches the electrician in net worth. Like a very long time, like into your 50s, I would
surprisingly long.
Yeah.
But people don't see that.
No.
They just think rich doctor, more money, you got it made. Yeah.
But so that's where it gets into like, it depends. Like if I'm talking to the electrician, I'm going to be like, really emphasizing like you have an opportunity to save a ton of money. You're single, especially if they're single.
Yes.
I'm assuming they're single. Like $100,000 single is like prime time. I mean, you save a lot, I would think, depending on where you live, a whole lot of that for long term. And then the compound, look at a compounding interest projection. Yeah, those numbers look crazy when you start in your 20s and look forward. But some people don't have that option. If you have a passion, I think it's more important to kind of work in something. I mean, if you have that opportunity to work in something that's enjoyable, like I don't know much about electricians, but like a lot of physicians that I know are like, they, enjoy their work, or they did it for, passion-based reasons. Like they had a passion for helping patients. And that's pretty valuable, but there is cost to it. I mean, it just takes a while, and you got to take out student loans and get set back, but it eventually catches up.
So I like your points that in your 20s, you're discovering what you're about, your career. And that's what life's about. It's not all about you want to be comfortable and not be broke, but life isn't about money, shouldn't be as much as being doing something you're passionate about, giving back to the community. And to your point, we can't ignore that about finding the right spouse. That is like the biggest money blast right there. Is if you get divorced, which what is it, over 50% of people and marriages end in divorce now?
Well,
that right there is the biggest slash to your income.
We are BS free MD, so I got to call BS.
Let's get some disclaimers in there.
Yeah, 50% of marriages end in divorce, not 50% of first marriages.
Correct. Yeah,
because because the marriages that end up in divorce at a much higher rate than 50% are second and third marriages. I mean, if you're Elizabeth Taylor, 6, 7 times. So that's the key. So this idea that half of marriages fail is technically correct, but it doesn't mean that half of people that get married for the first time, their marriages fail.
So you should talk to your future spouse about money before you even get hooked up, so that you can avoid divorcing them. I mean, that's a big cause of divorce, is conflicts with money.
Well, isn't it like the first or second?
I mean, it's up there.
Yes.
Yeah, it's up there. But I mean,
well, it's like sex and money. I mean, let's be honest. That's what it is. That's what breaks people up.
Yeah. I mean, so like when you're in your 20s too, you can that I'm not trying to say you don't need a financial plan to, like, you can have a financial plan even though you're like career searching. All a financial plan is, going back to what I was saying earlier, is like, what are your goals? Like, what are you trying to go for? And then how are you using money as a tool to help you get there? So, it doesn't have to be complicated. It can be pretty simple. It can be like, I'm spending all my money because I'm in training and like I'm not making much and I'm just looking for a spouse, and like, or some people are like, I'm spending money on my bar tabs because I'm paying for drinks for somebody's because I'm trying to find a spouse, or I mean, whatever the answer is for you. Like, everybody's got.
And then I'm laughing, thinking, and then when you go through the divorce, you're spending money on your bar tab because your divorce blew up, so you're at the bar continuously.
No, that's all I got. It was just drunkenness. It's just if I got her drunk enough, she would go out with me, right? Actually,
that's what I mean.
It's a dirty little secret in our relationship. There you go.
But
it's only been 31 years.
I was with my wife probably on like our third date or something. I already started talking about money. Like, I just went hardcore it. I also am a financial planner, but like, we hit that early.
Some people think that's weird, but a lot of people do that with, obviously, kids. That's like always the thing, do you want kids or not kids? Because that's a huge life decision, as well as values and where you want to live. But money should be right up there, and not a weird thing to talk about with somebody that you're like, how do you like to spend your money? Do you like to save? What are we going to do with your money? How are we going to connect our bank accounts? That's another big
how much credit card debt do you have?
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's like, here's my STD checkup and here's my bank statement. Like,
let's go ahead and get these out in the open. But I mean,
your body is clean, but your credit cards are laden with herpes.
Yes. Yeah, that can be a problem. Yes. But
that's a problem.
It doesn't. It's more just a challenge. It's your first kind of example of a challenge as a couple, and marriage is just working through challenges. So it's not necessarily a deal breaker, but like, those are conversations to have on the front end. And the other thing about money is, the more you learn about somebody financially speaking, it's one of the best like indicators or measures of what's most important to them. Like, to me, it's like a good barometer of like, because everybody's like, oh yeah, I'm a good person. Like, I'm, if one of the examples of this, you see people in church, like, they talk about, they're like, yeah, I'm very charitable. But then you go look at the church's books and you're like, wow, not so much. Like, so a lot of people don't actually follow through with what they say is most important, is my point. So the way money can be kind of like a BS meter, I guess, in some ways,
I love
to
it.
what's really most important to them. And you want to learn that as soon as possible with a spouse.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's brilliant. And I think another big indicator, I don't know if you ever counsel people this way. I mean, there literally you should have premarital counseling with your pastor, and then you should have premarital counseling with a financial advisor. It would make a huge difference, because I don't know how many friends I have, like, still like our age, like in our late 50s, that have his and hers money, and somebody pays the mortgage, and somebody pays, the child care, and somebody pays the private school, and so, and I'm like, what we finally decided is we get a little bit of disposable income that we don't have to talk about.
We call it our allowance.
So spend it on whatever you want.
Like
Everything else that comes in, regardless of who earns it, goes into basically our family finances, which we treat like a business, and then everything comes out of there. So, but I mean, I'm sitting like this idea that one spouse earns more than the other, which is virtually 100% of the time. Ergo, because the one person earned more, they get to spend more. Like that seems like building your house on sand.
Yes, correct. That's a good analogy. It's all about, peeling back the layers. Like, why are you doing that? Some people will say like it's because he makes more money or whatever. But like, you want to peel back the layers on that. Like, why are you doing that? A lot of people are like, well, because we want to have separate money, or a lot of times it's the underlying purpose or the underlying reason is because of trust or mistrust, or even like prior experiences where they've been taken advantage of. Or there's typically you have to peel back the layers to find out the true meaning behind people's actions like that. Not always, but like sometimes people are just like, well, I just did it because that's just the way it's been done, and I just haven't taken the time to change it. But in my experience, most cases there's some like underlying reasoning behind it. So when you find that, then you got to really put it to the test of like, okay, well, why did you get married? And do you really believe what you said when you made your vows? Because your vows are like tie the knot, like two become one. And that's pretty big deal. Financially speaking, the application of that is like combine your money, like two equals one. Like you have to. So an example of acting that out would be to take your separate finances and turn them into one finance. But it depends on if they believe that. Like some people don't agree with me, and that's okay. It's just I'm just saying like that's what I believe. That's what I like said. That's what, and I want to try to follow that. I'm not doing a perfect job at it, but like that's where I would want to move towards. But some people feel differently about it, and that that's everybody's got their own opinion.
But
because most people don't sleep in separate beds and have like conjugal visits in their house.
Some people do.
Some people do, but most of usually there's
we do that, but that's only on Marvel superhero night. But we won't get into that.
But there's that, or reminds me of the whole thing of the living together before you get married, so that we can see if you're compatible to test things out. But there's always a I think selfish motivations, and same with the separate bank accounts is exactly to your point about trust, because you don't trust the joint because you think the other person's going to blow money, spend it.
I've had that conversation with people. I've had that conversation, and I think to a person, none of them are still married to that person. We don't understand. She's too much of a spender.
Yeah.
And my response is, then you don't trust her.
Right.
And marriages are not built on love. Marriages are built on trust.
Not going to work.
So you better fix that trust problem, or the light at the end of the tunnel is an oncoming train. I mean, that to me, that is just so unbelievably black and white.
Yeah. Well, you're good. You were a good friend to challenge them. Like most people are like afraid to challenge people, but you're BS-free MD, so you're better at challenging things. But like, a lot of people don't have the courage to challenge their friends. And I think that we could work on that. Everybody could. But like as a financial planner, I feel like that's partly our job in some ways. We're kind of put in this position where we have to challenge people, and it gets uncomfortable sometimes because we're like, hey, do you realize what you're saying is in conflict, like with what you're saying this over here, but you're saying that over there, and we got a little bit of an incongruency here that we need to address and call attention to it, and it gets uncomfortable in occasions
because you
like
can become a counselor. I mean, really.
And some people don't want to admit it. They don't want to address it. Like if your buddy's like, no, it's not a trust issue. Like we're good. Then that's like bury your head in the sand. So you can't do anything with that. And some people are there, and that's like go see a therapist to work through because usually it's some deeper issues. But a lot of people can, once you call attention to it, they're like, yeah, you're right.
So if people are aware and willing to even combine their finances to the point where it's still an issue because one person's the spender, one's the saver, or where there's dichotomy going on, how do you advise clients then or rectify that? Because A lot of people can sort of work it out, balance it out, but a lot of people can't. And we've been those people. And we've been both sides of the coin. We flip-flopped actually on the teeter-totter initially when, like I said, when we first got out of residency, I became the massive spender. I think Tim came home and there's always a Pottery Barn delivery box. There was no Amazon back then at the doorstep or whatever. And then as time's gone on, we've kind of flipped. How do you help people get through that to rectify balancing out the teeter-totter if one's more save or spender?
I mean, as a financial planner, I kind of try to be like more of the coach role for that kind of thing. Like I'm going to try to help them find their own path to success, ideally.
Yeah.
Now, my natural personality is just to be like, do it this way, let's do it. And so
of course.
my like natural personality would be like, combine your finance. Come on. It's like, this is simple here. Like that's going to be better to combine your finances because 2 becomes 1. And that's going to force you to call attention to the issues, which is accountability built in, because like if your one spouse is a spender, then the other spouse that's not is going to be seeing it. And then there's going to be this built in, like, eventually you're going to have to address the issue that's an issue all along. And it's just going to make it happen faster, which is healthy. That's like my personal, tendency to address it would be that way. But with clients, I try to be a little more delicate because everybody has different experiences. And a lot of times they're not telling me the full story just because they're not comfortable yet. So you have to be a little bit more delicate. Sometimes there's some it could be that there was a experience in their childhood that's like affecting them that they're not really coming clean on yet, that like they really, they had some bad experiences with like their parents because the mom, or the dad, really just screwed their entire finances up. And so you want to like be careful with that because those kinds of things exist pretty regularly. So that's the dichotomy there. It's kind of a tricky situation. So when I'm actually working with people, I'm going to tread a little bit more lightly, but on a podcast, I can say both.
Yeah. So say if they have a joint account, and one's more the spender, one is the saver. Does it tend to, I don't know, would you say not even itself out because the other person is seeing it? But I know that people still have secret credit cards or
it's not even. It's a lot.
They
of times
rack
it's
up
not
the
even
debts.
I don't even think it's because it's like usually the spouses can both see it if they really try to. It's more just like not the top of mind account. So like they don't pay as much attention to the other spouse's account just because it's not the thing they're paying attention to. And it's more of like the awareness aspect when they have separate accounts. Typically my experience is that they're just not paying as much attention to the other spouse's separate account. And then it's just kind of like they're not aware too much of what's going on. And that can sometimes be unhealthy. But it does. I've seen people make it work. It just seems to be a harder.
So the other thing, I think the big elephant in that room is that one person, even if a joint account, one person tends to be the person that pays the bills, does all the books, can squirrel away money, or I'm not saying that person does, but the other person who has nothing to do with it, it's like, I don't want to deal with paying the bills. I don't want to do anything. You take care of it because I hate dealing with money, to the point where we've seen, and I know that you've seen, disasters happen because one person is spending it, or maybe not spending it, but they die. And then the other spouse is left like not knowing where anything is at. What are your suggestions for that?
Yeah, that we see that a lot. And I think I would advocate for like some level of awareness for both spouses. Like for me personally, my wife is the type that will say like, you handle it. I don't need to get into it. Like, just tell me if you need me, like I'm out. Like I'm not interested in getting into the finances at all. So that's her lean. So if we went on our way like that, she would not know anything, literally. So I have to go a little bit more out of my way. And this is what we do with clients too. Like typically there's a lean one way or the other with one spouse like that doesn't want to be involved. So we try to pull both spouses in, occasionally into conversation so that they can at least just listen into the conversation. And then like with my spouse, I provide like this financial organizer document once a year to her where I'm like sharing that. And it's basically all it is just like all of our financial stuff on one page, like all of our accounts, all of our insurances, our estate planning, our contact people, like right there on one page. So it's essentially, it's like, if something happens to me, here's the thing you need to pull out. And it's pretty important, but like, you don't really need to know all this stuff because I'm dealing with it. But like, so that she's told me like that helps her feel like she's somewhat aware, like she kind of knows what's going on. But she doesn't actually, I don't think she like scopes through the details.
But you're a financial planner and that's your job. So she shouldn't have to worry.
She doesn't have to worry about it.
Right. But there's also fat doctors. So it doesn't, just because you do a certain job doesn't mean you practice what you preach.
Yes.
So, you know,
it's do that. I mean,
by the way, are you doing a podcast in a daycare, May?
Yeah. So to the audience listening, I'm really sorry, but this is in a public space, and a big family with a bunch of loud little toddlers has just shown up. And if you hear them
in a
speaking
conference room,
Korean, this is it's the lounge. There's, I don't have a door on here. I went to the back corner of this upstairs lounge, and of course these people had to come sit right beside me. So I don't know what to say. I could exit and go somewhere else. If it's really loud.
Slingshot is very effective.
Okay, well, maybe I will pause. I'll join you guys in a second and find another corner.
Okay. I just wanted to address it so if people hear in the background, they're not like, what in the wide world?
I'll just preface by saying this is a group of people that is very used to being close in personal space, and that's how they live their lives in their region of the world, and they don't care if they're loud.
And subway cars.
Space. There you go.
I'm guessing. All right. So where were we?
Anyway.
Sorry for taking the subway car off the tracks, but
I'm back to my question, which I think asking about financial dates. So you guys, there's a big talk about having a money dates like once a quarter.
How exciting is that?
Tim just like wants to pull all his nose hairs out instead, because I'm the one that does all the money, and I'm like, hey, we need to go over the stuff so you know how much money there is and how much money you can't spend, and he just like.
Because May's the CEO of our. We have an interesting kind of vibe because I'm working more now than she is, so I'm earning most of the money. But she's always been sort of the CEO of the house, so the paying the bills. So she's actually had a lot more of the emotional distress because she's more of a control freak kind of person, and she sees what's going in, what's going out, and so we have to do that because I think it's very unusual for both partners to be exactly on the same page,
right?
Spending, saving, cataloging, recording exactly what's going on. I think that would be very unusual.
Yes.
And so you have to have some sort of summit meeting every once in a while where you come. I don't really like it. Money date just gives me. If it's a money date and you just throw me on the bed and throw money on me, that would be cool. But that's not what it is.
Well, that's not that kind of money date.
No, that's not that kind of money date. So do you recommend those at quarterly at all for people just to go over stuff where somebody, especially for people, I'm biased, that don't have spouses as financial planners or accountants or CEOs, so that they're kind of more...
I think if they're coming to our meetings, they should be okay. Like if somebody's working with a financial planner,
so if you
you should kind of expect them to keep both spouses in the loop. And if only time that doesn't happen for us is if one spouse is like very much not gonna come to meetings. Like we try to pull both spouses in on at least one meeting a year or so, like to try to like loop them in on the big picture. And so that's important to us. And the only time that doesn't happen is when they're like intentionally like not coming. So if you're working with somebody, like you should rely on them to kind of like loop you in both spouses wide. That's one of the value I think adds of working with a third party to help with your finances. Now, if you're not working with a financial planner, then I would probably lean the date night thing can be helpful for anybody, but especially if you're not working with a financial planner. And especially if you're having trouble with like things like budgeting and spending, which I feel like everybody has, that's more of like a seasonal thing. Like everybody has trouble with that at some point in their lives. And if you say you didn't, you're probably lying. So, that's to me a seasonal thing. At least that's how I've experienced it. And so there's been seasons of my life where I'm like, we need to have some regular conversations about our money because we're kind of getting a little loosey goosey and like we need to rein it in and, that kind of thing. But I am not a fan of financial date night either. Like I'm like, let's go have a date and have a date. Like, I don't want to talk about money. I talk about it all day long already. So that's my personal preference. My wife doesn't like it either. So we never have financial date night. We have financial conversations, but it's like 9 to 5 hours, like normal, business hours. That's how we do it. But, it's kind of a personal preference.
But, it's interesting though, because it comes back to trust, and it comes back to, we're probably going to start doing 10-minute podcasts once a week on, I think we're going to start out with marriage stuff because people seem to be enamored with the fact that we appear to like each other and have been married for 31 years and are both doctors. Somehow that seems like a marketing point. So we'll share that. But I've always said that if you're in a relationship with somebody and your primary goal is to get what you need from them, then you're not in a marriage, you're in a hostage negotiation. And unfortunately, you're both hostages. And so really what it comes down to is you need to be looking to what your spouse needs and then trying to meet those needs. And from as much as I don't want to do the money date, I know how much it means to May to feel in control of me knowing what is going on financially. That makes her feel in control, which means that's a loving thing to me to do. And so that's why,
yeah, well,
I mean,
from my
again,
point of view, it's like, if I don't know, here I am. It frustrates, I guess, for me if he's not wanting to know about it. And honestly, it pains me too to have these date night things, but we have to, every now and then I'll say, hey, let's sit down. And I just want you to know what's where, how much you're spending. Because, if he's spending more than I think he should be in certain categories of our budget, and I'm sticking to the budget, but he's not because he doesn't really want to pay attention, then I feel out of control, and I feel like it's unfair because he has no role in it, and I have to kind of, to me, the date nights give him ownership, and he has to play a role in it instead of like, I don't want to know, I'll just go spend or save or whatever it may be. So that's important as much as I don't like it either.
Yeah, you got to be focused on your spouse and not yourself. Like most people come in with selfish intent on things. That's where everybody leans. So if you're coming in with selfish intent.
Yes.
That's always been my contention of the living together before you get married. Because then it's about you. It's about we need to make sure I need to make sure that you're compatible with me.
Yeah.
When in my opinion, a successful marriage is exactly the opposite. It's we're both incompatible because we're both like fallen, broken people.
Correct.
But we'll make a commitment and figure it out as we go.
We're going to stay married anyway.
Well, I'm just thinking if one person...
So divorce is not an option. Homicide potentially, but not divorce, right? I mean, so...
Till death do us part. I mean...
Yeah, exactly. I kept my promise. I know it was illegal, but I kept my promise.
Do what you got to do. Yeah,
I was just thinking to the point about the money dates. I mean, I guess it wouldn't matter if one person is taking care of the bills and the other person is kind of more of a saver. And it's like, well, there's nothing really to discuss because everything's going smoothly and there's no big things. Whereas if the other person is the spender, but they're not involved in the money and doesn't want to have anything or know about it, well, then that's a problem because then they're spending and they don't want to be aware. And so
my wife is the spender of the house. Like she does all of she's basically like the purchasing agent for our family. So she does all the purchasing. So like, but she doesn't do the planning and look at the big picture. So like a lot, I'm the one that I look at our big picture and then I have kind of like these guardrails established. And every once in a while we kind of like start bumping up against the guardrail. And then I'm like, Alison, we need to have a talk about money. I mean, I try to be like loving in it, but a lot of times she's like, oh no, what did I do?
Right,
But
because you take it
really,
personally.
I'm like, it's not you. It's like your half the stuff you're buying is like stuff for me in the house and whatever. It's all good. Just like we need to go over it. It's all it is. It's like a kind of a spring cleaning kind of thing. And so then we just kind of talk through the issues that are happening that are causing us to butt up against the guardrails. Whereas back in the day when we first got married, I would get the credit card statements in the mail and I would be like, point the finger
Oh.
at her. I mean, I didn't realize what I was doing, but I was like, what is this? What is this? What is this? And then it was just like instantaneous, guaranteed fight. But it was selfish too. I was coming at it from like the, what are you doing with my money? Kind of thing. And that's not the way to do it, but that's how I did it at first. You learn though.
Yeah, well, I
But
think
it's just
that's
like
I think
health.
that's a wonderful point because we all make mistakes. I mean, we made tons of mistakes financially. We spent too much money. We, all sorts of stuff. But because we at least paid ourselves first and just continued to do the boring stuff, it's going to work out fine. It's going to be okay. And that's, I mean, I think that's one of the biggest themes is just start early and do the you can get rich slow and boring. Slow and boring is the way to get rich.
Correct.
All the sexy stuff, if it happens, good for you, but it's slow and boring wins the race.
Steady, yeah. Slow and boring wins the race. It's not the shiny objects that get you wealthy, and it's not, and it's income and more money in itself does not make life better either. That's a big misconception. So like earning the big pay raise or working more hours, that doesn't typically improve life much. Sometimes it makes it worse. So I would, that's kind of another philosophy of money thing that I think is important. Like, I like the concept of like rich versus wealth. Like a lot of people, like as kids, they're like, the guy driving the BMW is the one that's happy because he's got so much money and he's rich. Versus like the guy driving the old beat up Toyota Corolla is probably unhappy or whatever. But it's like we sometimes get all this stuff backwards.
Oh, I think 100%. Isn't there a survey where they?
Oh, I was gonna just say
the money, because there's sort of this dose response curve, right? Where it basically peaked around $100,000, I think.
Yeah.
In today's money,
income.
Where if you're way below that, then in income, then you're less happy because you're always
it's
stressed.
Necessities.
Right.
Yes.
And because you can't meet the necessities. But if you're kind of just above median and maybe, the 75th percentile, that's sort of the of income. That's sort of the max because, you can take vacations, you can have a couple hobbies, and there's only so much that you can do with the day. And that's about it. And then when you get past that and you get into these gigantic amounts of money, it is fascinating to look at these people because so many of them, celebrities and giant business people, they don't seem very happy. And one of the biggest indicators of the quality of your life, in my opinion, is the quality of your relationships. And a lot of these people have the crappiest relationships you can comprehend.
Yep.
And I'm like, okay, you're making gigantic phallic shaped rocket ships and you're bald and you're on growth hormone and you own a company called Amazon. But, I don't know that I would necessarily want to hang out with you.
Yeah. Have you seen research? One of my favorite things is some of these science guys have done research on return on happiness with financial.
Yes, I was just about to say that,
which is fascinating because of what they found. And this is all relatively newish kind of research, but what's super interesting, and it kind of goes back to like, I mean, a lot of people are not surprised by this, but the best return on your dollar is in terms of like improving life satisfaction is actually like giving money away, especially to like a cause you care about or involved in. That's like the top of the list thing you can do, which is counterintuitive, I think, to a lot of people. Because if that was true, if you believe that, like, I think there would be a lot more charitable giving and people would give. Like if you see people making, I mean, going back to your 100,000 is where your satisfaction peaks. And if somebody's making 500, if they truly believe that their life would be improved by giving, they would give the 400,000 and just live with 100. I mean, like, sounds crazy, but like, if you're believing this, and I can verify that, I feel like the more we've given, the more our lives have improved, and the less I like worship money. Like, that's another thing. A lot of people worship money. Like, that's a big thing. We don't say it like that, but like, a lot of people very much are into their money and their stuff.
Right. And that's exactly the point. I mean, I've quoted that Bible verse like a zillion times. It's actually really funny. Our son was probably 7 years old, and we read the verse, you can't serve God and money. You'll love one and hate the other. And he starts crying because he's like, I really love money. I mean, he actually understood at the core of who he was that it really meant
He's
something.
He's going to hate you for saying that on the podcast, but it's totally true.
Yeah, he doesn't listen. He doesn't give two craps about our podcast. But it's interesting because it really is. It's you can't serve God and money. You can't serve two masters. That was never. You can kind of serve two masters. You can kind of do this. You can have both feet on either side of the fence. You can't. That's the point of that verse. You can't.
And that's why that research is so fascinating to me, is because it like completely reinforces that whole concept.
Yes, I'm trying to remember. There's a podcaster that and a financial planner, and you probably know his name, isn't it? Wesley or Wes. I'll think of it in a second, but he's written a book, and I actually read it. It's fascinating how he did research from his clients and found the sweet spot, just like you said, where the happiness return is on income, because everybody thinks more money, better life, which is not necessarily true. But he also came up, it was all about retirees. There was this big focus too, and how, what is the best, this was focused on retirement, but the best income for retirement. And it really is like around 110,000 a year. And also the happiest retirees have this, but not that. And fascinating about the BMW, the most unhappy retirees own BMWs. The most happy retirees drove like Honda Civics
old crappy cars.
Or not old crappy, but just a mid-grade car. I think a Lexus and then it was a bunch of things. The happiest retirees, take vacations, but once a year, and they're moderate. And it was a really good read because you think that you need all this stuff, or that people, of course, our kids hated growing up with $2 income.
This episode went down a lot of bunny trails, which was really fun. And so we had to split it into two because otherwise it would be like Joe Rogan. And unfortunately, I don't have a bong and whiskey.
Wait a minute. I call BS on this.
What? You're saying I have a bong?
No, I'm saying you could keep talking forever.
I could, but there's sort of I call it the Rogan rule. Once you go over past 2.5 hours, you should be required to do substances on the podcast.
Yeah, that would require some caffeine, chocolate, and something else, some Red Bulls for people to hang in there.
At least nitro cold brew.
That's what we decided. But some really good stuff in there, and we hope you found it informational and useful. So this show split into two parts, like Tim said. And stay tuned for part 2, where we delve deeper into his financial expertise, his invaluable insights, and the remarkable impact he continues to make on the lives of others. And we share more of our do's and don'ts and faux pas as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Because we've made all the same mistakes everyone else.
If you've been liking it, stay tuned for that. And the shout out of the week, today's podcast shout out goes to Dave Bauer. You know who you are. We had a lot of fun recording our Doc Tales last week, and there Dave went, commenting away and giving us tons of great comments and suggestions. And Dave is one of the reasons that we have a great show, because of the feedback. Thanks so much for your support week after week. See you guys next time.
It's no secret that medicine is a bit uptight. That's why Tim and I created BS Free MD, to mix things up a little and have fun in the process. Besides, we are having these exact same discussions all the time, so we thought we might as well invite everyone to the party. If you really like us, you can get plenty more, and maybe see one of Tim's cool tattoos on our Instagram or Facebook pages at BS Free MD. See you next time.
BS3MD as raw and real as possible, we can't be held responsible for any medical decisions or discussions had as a result of what you've heard on the show. We know, bummer. But the truth is, we really do care about your questions. So feel free to reach out to us by email at doc@bs3md.com.